The forbidden prophecy of Enoch. In the shadows of the earliest times, before the great flood swept the earth, there was a man who walked between two worlds. His name echoed in the corridors of eternity, Enoch. But what he saw, what he recorded, remained hidden for millennia, stored in manuscripts that few dared to study and that many preferred to forget. Imagine a lost library, not of stone or papyrus, but of forbidden knowledge. Words written before writing itself became common among men. Visions of the sky and the abyss, recorded by trembling hands that witnessed the impossible. This is not just another forgotten story from antiquity. It is a window into mysteries that challenge our understanding of time, destiny, and the very fabric of reality. There is something disturbing about texts that disappear from official canons, something that causes concern when we realize that certain narratives have been deliberately kept away from the eyes of the masses. Why? What do these pages contain that makes them so dangerous? What truths were considered too heavy for common humanity to bear? The story of Enoch does not begin with birth, nor does it end with death. It transcends these borders. Some traditions mention that he was taken away, transformed into something beyond human. But before that sublime moment, he wrote. And what he wrote would forever change the way certain groups understood the cosmos, the fall, redemption, and the end of all things. On this journey, we will walk through forgotten lands. We will explore the fragments that have survived, the translations that have resurfaced from caves in the desert, the whispers that have passed through centuries in dead languages. We will not seek easy answers, but rather deep understanding. We will not impose conclusions, but we will open doors for reflection. Prepare to delve into one of the most enigmatic prophecies ever recorded. A prophecy that some say has been hidden for reasons beyond theological understanding. A prophecy that, even after millennia, continues to whisper uncomfortable truths about the past, the present, and what is yet to come. If you feel called to explore these mysteries with us, consider joining this community of seekers. There is much to discover in the shadows of history. To understand Enoch's prophecy, we must first place ourselves in time. There are those who say that the writings attributed to Enoch date from periods between the 3rd century BC and the 1st century. Others suggest that certain oral traditions that gave rise to these texts are even older, lost in the mists of patriarchal times. The Book of Enoch, as it has come to be known, is not a single text, but a collection. There is the first book of Enoch, also called the Ethiopian Enoch, preserved in its entirety only in the Ge'ez language of Ethiopia. Aramaic and Greek fragments have been discovered among the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran, revealing that ancient Jewish communities considered these writings deeply significant. Certain traditions mention that Enoch lived before the Great Flood, being a direct descendant of Adam through Seth. The canonical scriptures record something extraordinary about him. Enoch walked with God and was no more because God took him. Genesis 5:24. This cryptic passage opened the door to countless speculations about the fate of one who did not know the common death of mortals. In historical context, Enoch's texts circulated widely among Second Temple Jewish communities. They were read, copied, revered. But something changed. Over the centuries, these writings were gradually removed from the Hebrew and later Western Christian canons. The Ethiopian Church remained one of the few to preserve them as sacred scripture. Why this separation? Some scholars suggest that the content of the books of Enoch presented complex cosmologies that did not align neatly with the emerging theologies of the first centuries. Others point to narratives about fallen angels, giants, and celestial revelations as elements that seemed dangerously close to traditions considered apocryphal or heretical. The timeline of the manuscripts is fascinating. Fragments found at Qumran date back to approximately the 2nd century BC. Ge'ez versions were preserved by Ethiopian copyists through the centuries, while the West remained largely ignorant of these texts until European travelers rediscovered them in the 18th century. Scottish explorer James Bruce brought copies of the Book of Enoch from Ethiopia in 1773, causing a sensation among academics. But it was only with the discoveries at Qumran in 1947 that the antiquity and importance of these texts were fully recognized by modern academia. There are layers upon layers to this story: ancient Jewish traditions, Essene communities, early Christianity voe, each group interacting with these texts in unique ways. And through it all, the prophecies remain, enigmatic and powerful, awaiting eyes that can understand their encrypted messages. What do you think about texts that disappear and reappear over the centuries? Share your reflections in the comments. The central mystery that permeates Enoch's writings is not just what is written, but why it was written and why it was hidden. There is a palpable tension between revelation and secrecy, between shared knowledge and wisdom kept only for the initiated. The Book of Enoch begins with a bold declaration. These are the words of blessing with which Enoch blessed the elect and righteous who will live in the day of tribulation. Immediately, we are transported to an eschatological context, where the end of times is not a distant abstraction, but an imminent reality for those who were considered worthy of receiving such knowledge. But what makes these prophecies forbidden? Why would texts that speak of judgment, redemption, and heavenly revelation cause so much discomfort to the point of being progressively marginalized? The answer may lie not just in what they say, but how they say it. Enoch describes journeys through the heavens, encounters with archangels, visions of the secrets of creation. He witnesses the places of punishment prepared for rebellious angels. See the treasures of snow and hail, understand the movements of the stars and the cycles of time. Receive revelations about the celestial calendar, about the nature of the sun and moon, about the winds and the seasons. Some say that this cosmological knowledge, this emphasis on celestial mysteries and direct revelations, represented a form of spirituality that later religious authorities found problematic. Not because it was necessarily false, but because it offered direct access to the divine without adequate institutional mediation. The mystery deepens when we consider the specific prophecies contained in the texts. Enoch speaks of coming judgments, of an age when the righteous will be separated from the wicked, of a time when hidden secrets will be revealed and the true nature of reality will be laid bare. It describes a world in transition, where old powers will be dethroned and a new order will be established. Some accounts suggest that these prophecies were read as mapping contemporary events by communities living under oppression. Enoch's writings offered hope of divine justice, of cosmic intervention that would correct earthly injustices. But this hope was accompanied by graphic descriptions of judgment and destruction. Perhaps the greatest mystery is this: why were texts that offered comfort to the afflicted and hope to the hopeless considered too dangerous to remain in the canon? What does this reveal about power structures, about control of narratives, about who decides which truths can circulate freely? There are no simple answers, but there is an invitation to investigation, to contemplation, to respectfully questioning the traditions we inherited and the stories we were told. Continue this journey with us. Subscribe so you don't miss the next chapters of this exploration. At the heart of Enoch's narrative, we find figures who transcend the common story. Enoch himself emerges not only as a prophet, but as a mediator between worlds. He is the one who walks the earth, but has access to the heavens. He who lives among humans, but talks to angels. The scriptures say, by faith, Enoch was translated so that he would not see death. He was not found, because God had translated him. Hebrews 11:5. This description highlights the uniqueness of his experience. Enoch is not just the recipient of distant visions, but an active participant in heavenly journeys. He sees, questions, receives answers, records. In the texts, Enoch meets the archangel Uriel, guardian of celestial mysteries and master of astronomical movements. It is Uriel who reveals to him the secrets of the calendar, the paths of the luminaries, the structure of the cosmos. There is deep reverence in these passages, a sense of awe at the perfect mathematical order of creation. Michael appears as Prince of Israel, intercessor and warrior. Raphael is presented as curator and guardian. Gabriel appears as a messenger of supreme revelations. These archangels are not mere mythological characters in the Enoch texts, but active agents of divine purpose, each with specific roles and responsibilities in the ordered cosmos. But there are also the fallen, the watchers, those angels who, according to the story, descended to earth and mingled with the daughters of men. Their leaders are named Semyaza, Azazel, and others, each one bringing forbidden knowledge, arts of war, weapon-making, cosmetics, sorcery, astrology, and enchantments. Certain traditions mention that this descent and this mixture generated the Nephilim, beings of extraordinary stature and power. These giants, in turn, brought violence and corruption to the land, precipitating events that would lead to the Great Flood. The narrative in Enoch dramatically expands the brief verses found in Genesis about the sons of God and the daughters of men. There are also the elect and righteous, those for whom the revelations are intended. Enoch writes for future generations, for those who will live in the last days and will need wisdom to discern the times. He sees himself as a scribe not only of his time, but of eternity. Methuselah, son of Enoch, appears as a recipient of teachings. Through him, prophetic knowledge passes to subsequent generations. Noah is mentioned in prophetic contexts as the one who will preserve humanity through the coming flood. What makes these characters so fascinating is their multidimensionality. They are not flat figures from ancient legends, but complex beings involved in cosmic drama, angels that choose, humans that ascend, powers that descend. All of this woven into a narrative that seeks to explain not only the origin of evil, but the persistence of hope. Do these stories make you reflect on the intersections between the heavenly and the earthly? Leave your thoughts below. At the heart of Enoch's prophecy pulses a conflict of cosmic proportions. It is not simply about good versus evil in abstract terms, but a war that spans dimensions, which began before human creation and will continue until the end of time. The conflict first manifests itself in the Watcher's rebellion. These celestial beings, created to observe and guard, made a catastrophic choice to abandon their posts, descend to Earth, and unite with humanity in ways that violated the established order. This was not a mere error of judgment, but a conscious transgression with devastating consequences. Why did they do this? The texts suggest desire, a fascination with human beauty, perhaps also arrogance, a conviction that they could improve creation, teach humans secrets that would make them similar to the gods. But what they offered as enlightenment turned out to be poison. Knowledge without maturity, power without wisdom, unethical technology. The conflict deepens when these fallen angels begin teaching forbidden arts. Azazel teaches metallurgy and weapon making. Others reveal enchantments, astrology for manipulative purposes, botany of consciousness-altering substances. The result is a civilization that advances technologically but regresses spiritually. A humanity that gains power but loses soul. The Nephilim, fruits of this forbidden union, become agents of chaos. Giants that consume the earth's resources, that spread violence, that oppress the weakest. The earth, says the text, cried out because of the injustice that covered it. It was no longer the intended paradise, but a battlefield where innocent people suffered under the tyranny of powers that should never have existed. But where there is darkness, there is also light resistance. The faithful archangels observe, report, intercede. Michael takes the cry of the earth to the celestial throne. Gabriel is sent to execute judgment on the children of the Watchers. Raphael receives the mission to arrest Azazel. Uriel warns Noah about the coming flood. The spiritual conflict in Enoch is not distant or abstract. It is immediate, visceral, with tangible consequences. Each choice made by the celestial characters has repercussions on earth. Every action of fallen beings generates human suffering, and each divine intervention seeks to restore balance, punish injustice, preserve a faithful remnant. There is also internal conflict. Enoch, in witnessing these realities, faces the weight of knowledge. How to carry visions of coming destruction. How to warn without terrorizing. How can we maintain faith in divine justice when evil seems to temporarily triumph? The fallen Watchers at a certain point ask Enoch to intercede for them, to take their supplications to heaven. But the answer he receives is clear. There will be no peace for those who corrupted creation. They will witness the destruction of their children. They will be imprisoned in darkness. They will await final judgment. This spiritual conflict reveals profound truth. Choices matter. Rebellion has a price. But there is also hope, because even in the midst of chaos, divine justice works, preparing restoration. The flood is not just destruction, but purification. Not just an end, but a new beginning. What do these narratives about cosmic conflict evoke in you? Share your perspective. The revelations contained in the Enoch texts are vast and multifaceted, encompassing cosmology, eschatology, ethics, and celestial mysteries. Each vision Enoch receives adds a layer of understanding about the nature of reality and the purpose of human existence. One of the most impressive revelations concerns the secrets of the universe. Enoch is taken on journeys across the heavens, where he witnesses the hidden treasures of creation. See the deposits of snow and hail. See understands the patterns of the winds, observes the movements of the stars in their perfect orbits. There is sublime mathematical order permeating all creation. The celestial calendar revealed to Enoch differs from the common lunar calendar. It is based on solar cycles of 364 days, divided neatly into 4 seasons of 91 days each. Certain traditions mention that this calendar was used by the Qumran community, distinguishing them from other Jewish communities. The calendar was not a mere system for counting time, but an expression of divine order, cosmic harmony, that should be reflected in earthly life. Enoch receives revelations about celestial geography. There are descriptions of burning mountains, deep abysses, rivers of fire, places prepared for different destinies of souls. He sees where the spirits of the righteous await resurrection, separated from the spirits of the wicked. There is detailed topography of the afterlife, suggesting that the afterlife is not a uniform state, but a differentiated reality based on choices made during earthly existence. The scriptures state, "Without faith it is impossible to please God, for he who comes to God must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who diligently seek him." Hebrews 11:6. Enoch embodies this faith not as blind belief, but as trust grounded in direct experience of the divine. There are revelations about the end times. Enoch sees apocalyptic visions where earthly kingdoms are judged, where systems of oppression are overthrown, where the meek inherit the earth. There are descriptions of weeks of years, prophetic periods where human history unfolds according to an established plan. Each era has its purpose, its challenges, its central figures. One particularly intriguing revelation involves the Son of Man, a heavenly figure of supreme authority who will execute final judgment. This figure in the Enoch texts has characteristics that would echo later in messianic traditions. He is judge, king, liberator. He is the one who will establish a kingdom of eternal justice where tears will be wiped away and oppression will cease forever. Enoch also receives revelations about the nature of sin and righteousness. There are lists of transgressions, warnings against corrupt practices, calls to righteousness. But it is not empty moralism. It is ethics rooted in a deep understanding that earthly actions have cosmic repercussions, that individual choices affect all of creation. Certain traditions mention that Enoch was transformed at the end of his celestial journeys, becoming Metatron, celestial scribe, prince of the divine presence. Although this tradition is later, it reflects the perception that Enoch achieved a unique state among mortals, that he transcended ordinary human limitations through his proximity to the divine. Ancient revelations continue to whisper through the centuries, inviting each generation to contemplate mysteries that transcend time and space. Do you feel called to explore these revelations more deeply? Continue this journey with us. Enoch's prophetic vision does not paint an optimistic picture of the world that would follow the corruption brought by the fallen watchers. On the contrary, it describes an earth in spiritual, moral, and even physical collapse. It is a world where the natural order has been violated, where justice has been perverted, where the innocent cry out without being heard. The Nephilim, in their arrogance and power, consume resources beyond measure. There are descriptions of them devouring everything the earth produces, not out of necessity, but out of insatiable voracity. When natural resources run out, they turn against each other and common humanity. Violence becomes the norm, not the exception. There are those who say that this narrative serves as a parable about the consequences of human hybridity. When finite beings seek infinite power, when they transgress established limits for their own good, the result is not ascension, but fall. It is not freedom, but slavery to destructive forces that they themselves have unleashed. The earth, in the texts of Enoch, is personified as a suffering witness. It absorbs the blood of the innocent, carries the weight of transgressions committed on its surface, cries out for justice. It is not a passive scene, but a living part of creation that groans under corruption. Social structures crumble. There is no longer respect for elders, protection for the vulnerable, honor for the truth. Everyone does what is right in their own eyes, without regard for greater consequences. It is anarchy, not as freedom, but as chaos, where the strong oppress the weak without restraint. The forbidden knowledge taught by the fallen angels did not bring enlightenment, but darkness. More efficient weapons mean bloodier wars. Spells and magical manipulations create invisible dependencies and slavery. Cosmetics and adornments feed vanities that fragment communities. Manipulative astrology breeds fear and superstition instead of wisdom. There is an ecological dimension to the ruin described. The earth no longer produces abundantly hence. There are mentions of disturbed natural cycles, seasons that do not follow their normal course, imbalances that affect crops and livelihoods. The harmony between humanity and creation has been broken, and both suffer the consequences. But perhaps the most tragic aspect of the ruined world is the loss of memory. The generations that follow no longer remember what it was like to live in harmony with the divine, in alignment with creational purpose. They are born into an already corrupted world and assume that it has always been this way, that there is no alternative, that this is simply the nature of existence. It is in this context of ruin that the prophecy of coming judgment makes sense. It is not divine whim, but cosmic necessity. It is not revenge, but purification. The flood that Enoch predicts is not just random destruction, but a new beginning, an opportunity to restore what was corrupted, to preserve a seed of justice in the midst of a field of iniquity. Enoch, witnessing these ruins, understands that there is time for everything, time to warn, time to call for repentance, time to prepare the righteous for trial. And there is also time for judgment, for accounts to be settled, and a new era to begin. The images of the world in ruins in Enoch's texts are intense, but they serve a clear prophetic purpose: to show real consequences of collective choices, to warn against destructive paths, to call back to the alliance with the divine. Sign up to follow how these ancient prophecies echo through history. If the world in ruins represents consequences of initial corruption, the rise of darkness describes the deliberate deepening of that corruption. It is no longer just the result of poor choices, but the establishment of organized systems of evil, structures that perpetuate injustice, hierarchies that institutionalize oppression. In the Enoch texts, there are descriptions of how fallen angels not only transgress once, but establish patterns of transgression. They teach, organize, create lineages of initiates in forbidden knowledge. It is a systematization of evil, not just isolated acts of rebellion. Azazel, specifically mentioned, becomes the archetype of the corrupter. He not only descends, but remains active, continually teaching, spreading influence. There are those who say that his name has become synonymous with the scapegoat, the one upon whom collective sins are symbolically deposited in the Yom Kippur ritual. The scriptures state, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age." Ephesians 6:12. The Enoch texts offer a concrete narrative for this understanding of spiritual conflict that transcends merely human disputes. The rise of darkness manifests in layers. There is physical corruption, violence, bloodshed, exploitation of resources. There is intellectual corruption, distorted wisdom, knowledge used for destructive purposes, education that destroys instead of edifying. There is spiritual corruption, separation from the divine, worship of fallen powers, confusion between light and darkness. Certain traditions mention that the spirits of the Nephilim killed in the flood find no rest. They roam the earth like demons, continuing the work of corruption begun by their fathers. This tradition explains the origin of demonic evil that persists even after the flood judgment. The darkness was not completely eradicated, but contained, limited, awaiting final judgment. There are hierarchies of darkness in the texts. It is not disorganized chaos, but a perverse structure where each fallen entity has a specific function. Some try through thoughts, others through circumstances, still others through corrupt social systems. It is complex machinery aimed at a single objective, to move humanity away from its creational purpose. Enoch sees places where these entities await judgment. These are not ordinary prisons, but dimensions of absolute darkness, where there is no light, no hope, only waiting for the final consummation. There are gradations of punishment corresponding to gradations of transgression. Divine justice, even in judgment, maintains precision and equity. The rise of darkness reaches its climax when it manages to convince humanity itself that there is no darkness, that everything is relative, that good and evil are arbitrary constructions. This is the ultimate triumph of darkness, not when it imposes its presence by force, but when it convinces its victims that it does not exist. But there are limits to this rise. Enoch clearly sees that darkness operates within established parameters. They can tempt, corrupt, destroy, but they cannot completely annihilate the light. There is always a remnant, there is always resistance, there are always those who keep the flame of truth burning. The prophecy not only describes the rise of darkness, but also announces its fall. There is a set day, a set time when all accounts will be settled, when the oppressors will be judged, when the corruptors will be punished, when justice will finally prevail over injustice. This understanding that darkness has both power and deadline offers profound hope. It is not naive optimism that ignores harsh realities, but confidence grounded in prophetic vision that history has direction, purpose, and just consummation. How do these visions of darkness and its limits resonate with your understanding of the world? Leave your comment. In direct contrast to the rise of darkness, the Enoch texts also describe the tenacious persistence of light. No matter how deep the darkness, there are always those who maintain fidelity, who preserve truth, who resist the prevailing corruption. Enoch himself personifies this resistance. In a deeply corrupted generation, he chooses to walk with God. It is not isolation from the world's problems, but conscious engagement based on principles different from those that govern the surrounding society. He lives in the world, but is not defined by the corruptions of the world. Light resistance is not always dramatic or spectacular. Sometimes it is simply the faithful preservation of true traditions amid a sea of falsehoods. It is a refusal to participate in injustices, even when it has a personal cost. It's maintaining integrity when it would be easier to compromise. There are descriptions in the texts of communities of righteous people, small groups that maintain an alliance with the divine. They are a minority, often persecuted, sometimes ridiculed, but they stand firm. Their strength comes not from numbers or political power, but from conviction rooted in true revelation. Faithful archangels represent the heavenly dimension of resistance. They do not abandon their posts as the rebel watchers did. Miguel continues as defender, Raphael as healer, Gabriel as messenger, Uriel as guardian. In direct contrast to the rise of darkness, the Enoch texts also describe the tenacious persistence of light. No matter how deep the darkness, there are always those who maintain fidelity, who preserve truth, who resist the prevailing corruption. Enoch himself personifies this resistance. In a deeply corrupted generation, he chooses to walk with God. It is not isolation from the world's problems, but conscious engagement based on principles different from those that govern the surrounding society. He lives in the world, but is not defined by the corruptions of the world. Light resistance is not always dramatic or spectacular. Sometimes it is simply the faithful preservation of true traditions amid a sea of falsehoods. It is a refusal to participate in injustices, even when it has a personal cost. It's maintaining integrity when it would be easier to compromise. There are descriptions in the texts of communities of righteous people, small groups that maintain an alliance with the divine. They are a minority, often persecuted, sometimes ridiculed, but they stand firm. Their strength comes not from numbers or political power, but from conviction rooted in true revelation. Faithful archangels represent the heavenly dimension of resistance. They do not abandon their posts as the rebel watchers did. Michael continues as defender, Raphael as healer, Gabriel as messenger, Uriel as guardian of celestial knowledge. Each maintains their functions despite the earthly chaos, despite the rebellion of their brothers. Light endures through the transmission of wisdom. Enoch writes not just for his generation, but for all future generations. He preserves visions, records prophecies, documents revelations. It is an act of profound resistance, ensuring that truth survives even when lies seem to temporarily triumph. Certain traditions mention that the righteous are protected in mysterious ways. There are angelic interventions, divine providences, doors that open when they all seem closed. It is not a promise of life without trials, but a guarantee that in the midst of trials, there is a sustaining presence. Noah emerges as the supreme symbol of this resistance. In a completely corrupted world, he finds grace. He builds the ark, not because he fully understands the divine plan, but because he trusts. Your obedience becomes an instrument of preservation, not only for your family, but for all earthly life. The resistance of light also manifests itself in refusal to accept dominant narratives when they contradict revealed truths. The righteous in Enoch's texts are not conformists. They question, discern, evaluate everything in light of heavenly standards. They are not naive, but profoundly wise. There is a cost to resistance. The texts do not romanticize this reality. Those who choose light in the midst of darkness often face social isolation, persecution and misunderstanding, even from those close to them. But there is also reward. clarity of conscience, inner peace, hope based not on temporary circumstances but on eternal promises. Resistance is not only defensive but also creative. The righteous build alternative communities, preserve sacred literature, develop spiritual practices that keep them connected to the divine. They create islands of sanity in an ocean of madness, beacons of hope in a dark night. Enoch teaches that light, by its very nature, cannot be completely extinguished by darkness. It may be obscured temporarily, it may be forced to retreat into smaller spaces, but as long as there is a single soul who chooses allegiance, the light persists. And from that single flame, when the appropriate time arrives, renewing fire will spread. Enoch's prophecy thus offers not only warning of coming darkness, but also promise of persistent light. There is always a path for those who choose to walk it. There is always truth for those who choose to seek it. There is always hope for those who choose to keep it lit. Continue with us in this exploration of ancient truths that still illuminate present paths. The climax of Enoch's visions is not just a distant future event, but the convergence of all prophetic threads in a supreme moment of judgment and restoration. It is when all accounts are settled, when all injustices are corrected, when the eternal purpose finally becomes fully manifest, Enoch sees the great judgment day. It is not a vague metaphor, but a concrete event with specific participants and real consequences. Everyone will attend. Fallen angels who started the rebellion, their giant descendants, humans who chose injustice, and also the righteous who persevered in faithfulness. There are descriptions of thrones being established. The Ancient of Days takes his place. Books are opened where all actions are recorded. There is no hiding, no negotiating, no corrupting the process. It is perfect justice executed by a perfectly fair judge. The Son of Man, the supreme authority figure in the Enoch texts, executes the judgment. He separates the righteous from the wicked, rewards the faithful, punishes the transgressors. There are echoes of this figure in later visions, in messianic traditions, in apocalyptic expectations that spanned centuries. The scriptures declare, "And as it is appointed unto men once to die, but after this comes judgment." Hebrews 9:27. Enoch sees this judgment not as annihilation of being, but as a settling of accounts where each soul receives according to its works. The fallen angels receive their final sentence. There are no more attempts at intercession, no more supplications. They chose rebellion, now they reap eternal consequences. They are imprisoned in abysses of darkness, awaiting final destruction. Their names, once glorious, become synonymous with corruption and fall. The Nephilim, whose spirits roamed the earth after the flood causing destruction, are finally contained. Their power to tempt and corrupt is broken. The earth is cleansed of its evil influences. It is not just spiritual but cosmic liberation. But the prophetic climax is not just about punishment. It is also, and perhaps mainly, about restoration. Enoch sees new earth emerging, cleansed of all corruption. See the righteous receiving promised inheritance. See tears being wiped away, pain being healed, relationships being restored. There is a vision of the tree of life becoming accessible again to the righteous. What was lost in Eden is recovered, but at a higher level. It is not a simple return to the past, but advancement to a glorious future where the possibility of a new fall is eliminated by the complete transformation of the redeemed. The renewed earth knows no more violence. Lions graze with lambs. Swords are beaten into plowshares. War is forgotten as a nightmare from which humanity has finally awakened. It is the fulfillment of all the deepest aspirations of the human heart for true peace. Enoch sees times of abundance where trees continually bear fruit, where harvests are miraculous, where there is no scarcity or need. But more important than material abundance is spiritual abundance, direct knowledge of the divine, uninterrupted communion, wisdom that flows naturally from transformed hearts. The righteous shine like stars. There is physical transformation corresponding to spiritual transformation. Mortal bodies are clothed with immortality. Weaknesses are replaced by strength. Ignorance gives way to full knowledge. It is complete glorification of those who have remained faithful through all trials. The prophetic climax also includes cosmic reconciliation. Heaven and earth are no longer separated as they were after the fall. There is new harmony, new alignment, new integration. What God originally created as perfect unity is restored, but now tested by the fires of history and proven incorruptible. Enoch contemplates future generations living in this renewed land. There is continuity, not annihilation. There is history that continues, but history without the shadows of the past. It is eternity not as a boring stasis, but as an infinite adventure of discovery and growth in intimacy with the divine. The prophecy reaches you culminates in the declaration that God will dwell with his people. Not in a distant temple, not through multiple mediators, but direct presence, face to face, heart to heart. It is the consummation of every true religion, the fulfillment of every sincere spiritual quest. If these visions of culmination and restoration touch something deep within you, consider joining us on this journey of discovery. The prophecies of Enoch, passed down through the millennia, did not remain a mere literary curiosity. They generated consequences that echoed throughout history, influencing theologies, shaping apocalyptic expectations, inspiring spiritual movements, and also provoking controversies that led to their marginalization. One of the most significant consequences was the development of angelology and demonology in Second Temple Judaism. The detailed narratives about angels and their hierarchies, about fallen powers and their activities, provided a framework for understanding unseen spiritual forces that influence earthly events. Certain traditions mention that the Enoch texts profoundly influenced the Qumran community, the Essenes who preserved the Dead Sea Scrolls. For them, these prophecies were not distant speculations, but precise mappings of contemporary spiritual realities. They saw themselves as a community of light, resisting the rise of darkness, awaiting imminent divine intervention. Early Christianity was also impacted. There are direct quotes from the Book of Enoch in the New Testament. The Epistle of Jude explicitly cites a prophecy of Enoch about coming judgment. Peter makes references that echo Enoch's narratives about imprisoned fallen angels. The very concept of Son of Man, used extensively in the Gospels, has deep resonances with the apocalyptic figure in the Enoch texts. But there was also a reaction. As institutional Christianity developed and sought to define precise canons of authoritative scripture, the books of Enoch were progressively questioned. There was discomfort with his elaborate cosmologies, with his detailed revelations about celestial mysteries, with his narratives that seemed to excessively expand canonical biblical accounts. The consequence of this marginalization was a significant loss of knowledge. For centuries, the Christian West remained largely ignorant of these texts that had been so influential on ancient Judaism and early Christianity. Only the Ethiopian Church maintained Enoch as canonical scripture, preserving traditions that were forgotten elsewhere. The modern rediscovery of the texts has brought new consequences. Scholars have been able to better reconstruct the religious context of Second Temple Judaism. They understood more deeply the roots of concepts that had been assumed to be purely Christian, but which had older origins in Jewish apocalyptic literature. There are also consequences for contemporary thought. Enoch's themes of forbidden knowledge, of fallen angels, of giants and celestial conspiracies captured popular imagination. Countless theories, some respectful and thoughtful, others sensationalist and distorted, have emerged using elements of the Enoch narratives. Enoch's prophecy of final judgment and cosmic restoration offered hope to countless generations who lived under oppression. The promise that injustices would be righted, that tyrants would be judged, that the meek would inherit the earth, sustained persecuted communities through difficult centuries. But there was also problematic use. Some interpretations of Enoch's prophecies fueled religious exclusivism, justified persecution of groups considered children of darkness, and created rigid dualisms that made dialogue and mutual understanding difficult. The consequences continue to unfold. Each generation that encounters the Enoch texts must decide how to interpret them, how to apply them, what relevance they have for their time. There is a constant risk of both hasty rejection and naive acceptance. Wisdom requires discernment. Perhaps the most profound consequence is the permanent invitation to reflect on fundamental questions. Where does evil come from? Why is there suffering? Is there cosmic justice? What is the final destiny of humanity? Enoch's prophecies do not offer simple answers, but they provoke essential questions that each generation must face. In our time, when boundaries between the known and the mysterious seem to both expand and dissolve, when technologies offer powers that previous generations would consider divine, when consequences of collective choices threaten the very continuity of civilization, Enoch's warnings about knowledge without wisdom, power without ethics, progress without purpose, seem strangely contemporary. The ancient prophecies continue to echo, inviting each of us to choose between light and darkness, between justiety and oppression, between reasoned hope and fatalistic despair. The consequences of these choices are not just personal, but collective, not just temporal, but eternal. What do these reflections awaken in you? Share your thoughts as we walk together. As we end this journey through the forbidden prophecy of Enoch, we find ourselves before a mirror that reflects not only the distant past, but present realities and future possibilities. The texts we explore, preserved across millennia by faithful communities, continue to whisper truths that transcend time and culture. Enoch walked between worlds. He lived on the threshold between earth and heaven, between time and eternity, between human and divine. His journey was not one of escape from earthly reality, but of deeper understanding of that reality in light of heavenly perspectives. He saw what was hidden, understood what was hidden, recorded what few had the courage to preserve. The prophecies he delivered were not abstract exercises in theological speculation. They were urgent warnings, consoling promises, mappings of spiritual conflicts that unfold both in invisible dimensions and in concrete historical events. They offered future generations tools to discern the times, to maintain faith amid chaos, to preserve hope when darkness seemed to triumph. Scripture reminds us, "But the righteous shall live by faith, and if he draw back, my soul hath no pleasure in him." Hebrews 10:38. Enoch personifies this faith that does not back down, that perseveres, that walks firmly even when the path is not clear and the destination seems uncertain. The mystery that permeates these texts is not deliberate obscurity, but humble recognition that there are greater realities than our finite understanding can fully encompass. There are dimensions of existence that we only partially see, aspects of the divine plan that we perceive as through fogged glass. The prophecy does not remove all mystery, but it offers enough light for the next steps. What makes Enoch's prophecy forbidden is not the danger inherent in the truth it contains, but the discomfort it provokes in structures that prefer control to freedom, conformity to authentic pursuit, easy answers to difficult questions. Texts that empower individuals to directly seek the divine will always provoke resistance from mediators who prefer a monopoly on access to the sacred. But here we are, millennia later, still exploring these ancient words, still finding resonances in them with our own questions and searches. This alone testifies to the vitality of prophecies, their ability to speak across temporal chasms, their perennial relevance. The journey we took together does not end here. It's just the opening of doors, the beginning of deeper exploration, an invitation to continued contemplation. There are layers upon layers in these texts, meanings that gradually reveal themselves to those who remain attentive, truths that unfold to sincere hearts. We deeply appreciate your company on this exploration. Your presence, your attentiveness, your willingness to delve into ancient mysteries makes this journey possible and meaningful. Each person who chooses to seek wisdom, who dares to question dominant narratives, who keeps an open mind to truths that transcend conventions, contributes to preserving light in times that often seem dark. There is more beyond what we can see at this moment. Each ancient text we explore reveals connections to others. Each prophecy unfolds into new understandings. Each mystery opens doors to deeper halls of wisdom. The prophetic tradition did not end with Enoch. It continues, flowing through generations, adapting to new contexts, but always pointing to the same fundamental truths about justice, hope, and human destiny. The questions Enoch faced remain with us. How can we live with integrity in a corrupt world? How can we maintain hope when injustice seems to triumph? How can we discern truth amidst the cacophony of conflicting voices? How can you prepare for coming judgments while living fully in the present? There are no simple answers, but there is a way. There is light to guide, there is community to support, there is revelation to illuminate, and there is a permanent call for every sincere soul. Walk in faith, seek truth, preserve hope, resist evil, promote justice, prepare for eternity. May the visions of Enoch continue to inspire, the prophecies to challenge, the mysteries to intrigue. And may each of us, like him, choose to walk not according to the standards of the perishing world, but according to glimpses of eternal reality that remains. Stay connected with us on this ongoing journey of discovery and understanding.